Welcome to this installment of Communications and Cigars. I am your host, John Crook. Thank you for joining me today. This is actually week 2 of 3 for previously recorded episodes. As you can see kind of down here, we got Communications Cigars letting you know that it was previously recorded. So unfortunately, last week, this week's episode, and next week's episode, as I stated before, are recorded due to the fact that I'm going to be doing some other things, kind of communications related, so it's not all for loss on there. But I still wanted to get the installments out to you, the episodes out to you, so that is why we're doing the pre-recorded episodes on there. But join us Monday, November 1st. Once again, Monday, November 1st, we will be back 8 p.m. Central on our YouTube channel here, Communications and Cigars, for a brand new live episode on there. I appreciate everybody going ahead and joining us. Last week's episode, as well as this one, recorded. I really like to do these lives because I love the chat. I love the interaction. So, even though we are recorded, I want you to remember, please make sure, feel free to comment on the videos here. Join into the discussion. We've had a lot of good comments coming in. I've had a lot of, actually, messages come in. Direct messages, emails, and stuff like that saying, hey, John, I love the shows. Great topics. It's great. You're not just talking about amateur radio. You're talking about all aspects of communication and everything. We do have some more interesting episodes planned coming up here, and make sure on there. In addition, check into the description of there. Make sure you can go ahead and visit all of my other amateur radio buddies who do their shows on there. Check for their links in the comment section. Go ahead and check out their channels too. It's really nice to have a community where we can go ahead and discuss, get things out to you. So today's episode of Communications Cigars, we're going to kind of continue on the thought process from last week's episode. So last week's episode, if you remember, I had the fortunate ability to have a guest host on there with me. That was my dad, Wally N9VAO, and we discussed about this thing about mobile or portable, sometimes called handheld. What do you buy first? Do you buy that mobile radio? Do you buy that portable radio? It's always been a question. Always been a question. And even more so, an interesting one across all different facets of communication. So we're not just talking amateur. We're talking about business. We're talking about personal communications like Gmrs and stuff like that. We're talking about public safety communications. All those things involved. It's a worthwhile question. And some people said, you know, John, you did ask a good question, but I think there's one other aspect that we have to do it. Maybe we've made that venture down to determine if we're going to use a mobile or a portable. But what about the age-old question? So today's episode, what do we buy? Do we buy a mono band, a singular band radio? Do we buy a dual band radio? Or do we even buy like quad band radios that are actually coming out on there? Once again, we're not talking about amateur just alone. We are talking about all the different services that are out there. But we've talked the communication part. Let's talk about cigars. So for this week's episode, I'm enjoying a Noob Cameroon. It's a light wrapper on there. It's very pleasing to the palate. Now, some people know that I'll do like Maduros, Macanudos on there. I've done some of the acids and stuff, which tend to have a little bit of a sweeter flavor. Occasionally, I like to get one of these. It doesn't have a sweet flavor, but it does have a pleasing palate on there. I'm not a very big, heavy like cigar guy in regards to having something that's very strong and very dark, rich wrapper or something like that. Sometimes, actually, if the cigar is a little too strong for me, I actually will sometimes get that little bit of headache, that little bit of like the nausea kind of feeling and stuff on there. So, yeah, so just that's kind of thing there. I do enjoy it. I do love it. They are very good on there. One of the things to remember, even though you might be watching this at a recorded date, please go ahead and make sure that you can go ahead and tell us what kind of cigar you are enjoying with it, okay? I do know there are some people, hey, that don't actually smoke the cigars, but do like to tune in. So we've had people that have joked around like Communications and a Coke, or Communications and a cone as an ice cream cone and stuff. So if you are enjoying something other than cigars and stuff like that, please, by all means, let us know what you're doing or how you're enjoying this episode while you're watching it. So the big question now, with the way technology is advancing, is what do we do? Do we buy or do we get a single band or sometimes mono band radio? Do we get a dual band radio? Do we get, a quad band or a tri-band radio out there. Technology is advanced, okay? Technology is really advanced overall over the periods of time. You know, the aspects of having a dual band radio was kind of something that was out of the reach, out of the realm for a while, especially because, guess what? Radios were big and bulky, alrighty? They were limited in functionality and what you could do. And we're not, once again, we're talking about all aspects on there. And I, through the ages, have actually had radios that were big and bulky, but were dual band. Alrighty. Now remember, we are non-branded, non-manufacturer specific, but we're going to kind of sometimes every once in a while reference a radio or something on there. And I do want to bring that up there because I will reference it. One of the first dual band public safety LMR type radios that I can remember was, I believe it was the FTH 2070, I think it was, or 2050, it was the model number. It was actually made by Yaesu. And that was, I think it had 32 channels max on there. And it was big and it was huge. But you could do VHF and UHF in that radio. And what it was really kind of designed for was, of course, business and public safety, that kind of thing. But like, hey, my public safety department, the fire department, the police department, those kind of things like that are on VHF, but our public works is on UHF, okay, as a good example. And it was a big radio. This is obviously isn't it, but it was a big radio, big square like this and stuff like that. Once again, 32 channels, top display. I remember having it. Love that radio. And that was basically it. No zones really, no nothing. You know, it was just kind of those 32 channels. Well, as time went on, that concept of the dual band radio slid away. Okay. You really didn't see a lot of that starting to take place or a lot of that happening anymore. And I don't know if it was because of the technology at the time, the race or the need or the want to be able to get down to a smaller radios, which obviously, if you have a single band radio, it's going to be a heck of a lot smaller than a dual band radio. Makes sense, right? We're taking, you know, one radio that's a single band. And now if you think you have two of these and now we're trying to combine them together, how do we make it into a smaller radio? Well, components and times and stuff has all started to do that. And where you've seen, obviously, a lot of dual band radios, and I'm talking mobiles and portables now, of course, is the amateur radio community. They have a lot in there because guess what they need to do? They want to have that functionality. They want to have those features, two radios in one, okay? But this has actually started to catch on into different radio services or kind of a rebirth into it. And what you're starting to see here is that when we start to enter into different realms, so business realm, even the GMRS, FRS, I'll tell you kind of a second there, more MURS though. But people are saying, hey, I don't want to carry, two radios where possibly one radio is going to be able to do it all for me. So that's where it's a good question, because now here's what it is. We've said, hey, portable or mobile, last week's episode, mono band, single band, you want to say it, dual band, or quad band. So let's start out from the top. Let's start out with amateur radio. Obviously, the amateur radio market does have options in both those things. Now, funny thing about the amateur radio market is you tend to see a situation, as I relight. See, I talk too much. Told you I talk too much on these episodes. Started to see this rebirth of, do we have monoband radios, which you tend to see a lot of VHF monoband radios. Hands down, a lot of them. Alrighty. And that's because VHF is obviously very popular. But depending on the make, the manufacturer, those kind of things like that, you'll see some will have alternate band radios that are out there for the single band. And that can range between anywhere from 10 meters. There's still some 10 meters out there, radios out there. There's 6 meter radios out there, 2 meter, 70 centimeter. There's still some, if I didn't say 220 already. So there are a couple different radios that are out there, which are single band in all regards and all aspects on there. But as some people want convenience, some people want ease of operation, it comes down to, hey, I would like a dual band, I would like a tri-band, I would like a quad band, whatever kind of radio on there. Now, when you see into like base radios, when you see into mobile, like HF stations, obviously those are multi-band radios by design and definition on there. Alrighty, so I'm talking more of your, once again, your handhelds and your mobiles in that regard. So what is that factor? What is it? Now, two schools of thought come in, and once again, not just amateur, but two schools of thought are really going to come into play when you're looking at it from an operational standpoint. And that operational standpoint is that, hey, does a situation exist, or is a situation going to arise where I need to be able to talk on two bands at one time? So meaning, do I need to have a VHF radio? Do I need to have a UHF radio? Do I need to monitor both repeaters at one time, or both frequencies at one time? Then it kind of goes into the thing to play is that it's like, okay, if I need to be able to monitor, do I need to be able to talk? So that kind of starts to play into how we're going to go ahead and select what radios we're really looking for when it's coming in regards to single band, dual band, kind of quad band. Now, let's go to another service, because I mean, realistically, there are a short number of amateur radios. It's a very short list of amateur radios out there that actually are dual band. That's more what's getting prevalent. There are, once again, a few that are tri-band, and there's even a few that are out there that are quad band or capable of quad band operation on there. Let's switch gears though, because we want to stay with everything. Let's take a look at the GMRS FRS radio services. And actually, I want to include MURS. I didn't say MURS. Because dual band by definition is obviously two bands in a radio, right? Dual band, two bands capable. So, VHF is MURS, where GMRS FRS is UHF, all right? But I know there are some radios out there that do MURS and GMRS, or are capable of being set up for MURS and GMRS. Now, obviously, MURS and GMRs have more restrictions and stuff on there, channelization, power outputs, and everything like that. But once again, it comes into saying, hey, guess what? I can buy one radio that allows me to be able to be used on two different bands that are out there for me to communicate. So if I have friends that are on MURS, but I have friends that are FRS or GMRS, and I have that FRS GMRS license, now guess what? Am I going to need to be able to talk to the two different groups, one being on MURS, one being on GMRS, FRS, at the same time, or is it going to be something where, hey, I can be able to do that? That I don't need to. I do need to. Once again, it's going to be up to you as the user of the radio want it to be. And once again, there's multiple schools of thought I've seen. I've watched a lot of different views. I've read a lot of different views. And I see comments that are for and against dual band radios, tri-band, quad band, those kind of things. But it's funny, though, because it's coming out to the other markets. So you have amateur. You have MURS and GMRS. Now, obviously, there's really no, per se, marine band radio out there that's a dual band radio. No CB radios that are out there that are, and when I say CB, I'm talking about like the 27 megahertz range on there. I don't know about some other countries. Maybe there are some manufacturers that I'm just not aware of in the United States here. But as far as I know, there's really no marine or CBs that are dual band capable. But let's get into business and let's get into public safety. We'll start out with business first, because business doesn't have too much of this going on. And more so, I'm starting to see a trend of multi-mode operation in business radios as compared to dual band operation of radios. But I'll take a moment here. Dual band business type radios do exist. They can be programmed and stuff like that, but more people are looking to get into these kind of things, especially if you have different sort of situations and needs or wants on there. But doesn't mean that it's a good radio, doesn't mean it's a bad radio, because now when you get into that business realm of things, you start to say, hey, is this a big name manufacturer on there? Which, once again, we're non-branded, non-manufacturer specific, but it does raise that question, because there are some people in the realm of business radios that only want specific manufacturers. Now, because it's business-based bands, at least I tend to see a little bit more, of the manufacturers really kind of want to squeeze every dime out of there. So if you have a situation of saying, okay, wait a minute here, I need a UHF business radio, I need a VHF business radio, guess what? They want to make you buy a VHF business radio, they make you want to buy a UHF business radio. They don't want you to buy a dual band capable radio for your business needs and purposes. Does that mean that they don't exist? No, it doesn't, obviously. It means, it means that one manufacturer doesn't offer it. And that goes ahead, and we'll come into maybe a later episode we'll talk about of, is brand important? Is branding important on there? And once again, it's all up to you as the individual what you want to use and how you want to use it on there. So business tends to not really be too active in having dual band offerings. Once again, they do exist on there. But the next, I would say, radio service of anything that I would see, or type of radio discipline or something on there, that does offer a lot of in regards to dual band radios, and more so now getting into the point of quad band radios, is going to be your public safety realm of radios that are on there. In the public safety realm, we're starting to see a large progress of things that are going ahead and saying, hey, going back to that adage, well, the PD and the fire department and everything like that are on VHF. Public Works happens to be on UHF. But then the state radio system is, let's say, on 800 megahertz. So when it's coming into the regards of going ahead and saying, hey, how do I be able to communicate with all of them? That comes down to a question of infrastructure or end user. That's where we're starting to see more prevalent dual band radios come out. And you start to see a lot of the big name manufacturers are doing that now. Motorola is doing that. E.F. Johnson is doing that. I believe Kenwood is in the realm or something like that of maybe releasing an up-and-coming dual band radio. I don't know. But you're starting to see a lot of people do that. So now when you're doing that, do you have a quad band radio that's capable of VHF, UHF, 700 megahertz, 800 megahertz, that's now allowing me as the user to be able to hop between the different networks on there, which is the whole purpose of saying why we have dual band capable radios. Because the ultimate reason and purpose of having a dual band capable radio is going to be saying, hey, the user or the subscriber goes to the network instead of trying to link the networks together, all right, or making a conduit from the network to that other network. So if you really think about it, if you have a VHF radio, all right, and I'm talking about any sort of network right now, okay? I'm saying is that, hey, if I have a VHF only radio and I want to talk to a UHF user, how do I go ahead and talk to that UHF user? If I got a VHF only radio, how do I talk to that UHF user? We're different bands. So now we have to have some sort of infrastructure that comes into play between the two of them, alrighty? So how does that mean? How does that take place? Well, that takes place in regards to saying you have to have some sort of access point from a VHF radio, let's say, into a VHF system or network, and then that network or system connects to there, and then that comes out in UHF. Yes, can it be done on crossband repeating? Can it be done on linking just, two repeaters or radios together? Yes, it can be done that way. But once again, you have infrastructure. So the fight, the cause, the, hey, I want to be able to have a dual band or a quad band or multi-band or tri-band type radio is basically saying, how can I move between networks right now? How am I able to do that? Okay, because do I create infrastructure? Do I connect gateways? Do I do those kind of things like that? That ultimately becomes very difficult in nature because, once again, you're adding more, as I kind of put it, cogs into the wheel, cogs into the machine, chains into the link, whatever kind of thing you want to do. And if you have one of those chains fail, if you have one of those, that the cog of the machine break, well, guess what? Then your whole aspect of communication comes down. Now, in some cases, is it easy to get by with the dual band radio? Yes, it is in some cases, because guess what you're doing? So the amateur world will go back to that. VHF and UHF, two of the most widely publicized and used bands in the market now, because it's a situation where we're saying, hey, here's what it is. Here we have a VHF repeater, we have a UHF repeater. If I want to switch back and forth between the two, I simply program, okay, memory channel 1 is my local VHF repeater. Memory channel 2 is my local UHF repeater. Alrighty. Same thing with business. Now, business tends to, once again, be a little different on there, but that realm of how do you communicate across business networks is starting to take place. Now, one other thing I guess I should preface with this episode and understanding from is that, you know, we're not talking specifically now too about the different technologies that are out there, because that adds a whole nother layer and level of complexity, which I think maybe might be for a good up-and-coming episode that we might talk about in a future installment of the different digital networks and types of networks that are out there for it. But saying that ease of operation. So let's say, for example, you have, you know, which I experienced once, had a greenhouse, a big greenhouse area that had it. They had a lot of lights. They had a lot of things in the greenhouse, which basically caused interference to the VHF band. So what was causing was, as they were in the building, the VHF really didn't do good, even though it wasn't that large of area. They were able to, they needed UHF to be able to penetrate and talk through the building, through the different buildings and all that kind of jazz on there. But when you got out into the greenhouse, or out of the greenhouse area, you got into the area where, because they were also like a Christmas tree farm and stuff, guess what? The many, many different acres of land that they used, VHF tended to work better. So now how do you handle that? How do you have that as a business, you know, for those communications? Did you have people that carried VHF handhelds and UHF handhelds? Yeah, they did. And they had an infrastructure. But then what you were able to do, you were able to have management come along, and their answer, their solution to it was to create a was to utilize a dual band radio. Now, once again, dual band is going to increase cost over mono band, but still takes place. Public safety, obviously, no question on how we're going to go ahead and saying how much more of an advantage of dual band radio is, hands down, as compared to a monoband radio. But it really does, like I said, hit on a couple key points here, because we're trying to figure out how we bridge that gap. And then this kind of starts to come into the question of, you know, is it infrastructure based or is it user based? So I guess we've kind of, through this whole episode installment here, I think we kind of says, like, you know, hey, do we do monoband, dual band, tri-band, quad band, or now do we do infrastructure? And that really kind of comes up with some interesting points on there. Is there going to be a right answer, just like portable versus mobile? No, there's not going to be this undeniable answer. Realistically, it's always going to go ahead and come down to what you want to do, to what well, A, two things. A, what is available to you, and B, what is going to be your personal preference. I know some people that they only own a monoband HT. That's it, and it's at VHF for 2 meters. Why? Because that's all they have around there to talk on the repeaters is VHF. They don't have any UHF repeaters in range, or they might have UHF repeaters in range, but they're not really used, or they're once again linked to other infrastructure that is on there. GMRS, MURS users, those are actually becoming very intriguing radios on there. You know, where you have that ability to have a radio that, you know, just by turning to the channel, just changing that selection knob, is saying, okay, hey, I'm in MURS 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I go to GMRS 1, GMRS 2, GMRS 3, or whatever the case may be, because now I don't have to carry 2 independent radios to be able to talk to people on there. So it's food for thought. Once again, it's food for thought. I'm not going to tell you what works the best for you. As a matter of fact, I guarantee you that probably there are some people looking here and are like, now I'm just saying, hey, John, you know what? Dual band radio is going to work for me. If there's no ability to have a dual band radio, then I'm not going to buy that radio. And rightfully so. You have to use and you have to work on what's going to go ahead and be the best and most effective for you as the end user when it goes ahead and comes to a radio on there. So I want to basically go ahead and say thank you for everybody for tuning in to this week's installment of Communications Cigars. Once again, I do apologize for going and having 3 weeks in a row of recorded episodes. For some people are asking me, they say, what are you doing communications with? Actually, I'm doing a communications class on there on some Monday night things here. So that's kind of what had happened. I committed to it for a long time ago. So that's why these have been recorded episodes. But thank you for tuning in again today for it. Next week's episode will be once again recorded on there. Still doesn't mean doesn't tune in and stuff like that. Once again, want to go ahead and say thank you to everybody that has tuned in. Remember to hit subscribe on my YouTube channel if you want to be notified when these new installments are coming out there. Make sure, once again, in the actual description of there, check out my other YouTube friends out there. They have their own shows about many different things on there. I thank you for everybody who's doing support and everything then. So until then, until next week's recorded episode, we'll be back once again Monday, November 1st, live. Thank you for joining. Please stay safe out there. And remember, enjoy your cigars.